When the Third Reich fell in 1945, the world cheered. Evil defeated, justice served. But the truth was far messier. Nazism didn't disappear overnight, and its architects didn't simply vanish. Some were tried, others slipped away. Many blended back into society, and thousands escaped overseas. Ask what happened to the Nazis, and you find not a clean ending, but a maze of escapes, deals, and inconvenient truths history rarely highlights. A divided Germany and 4 different systems. After Hitler's fall, Germany was carved into 4 occupation zones run by the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Each power had its own idea of justice and its own way of dealing with former Nazis. All agreed on denazification, but the process looked wildly different depending on where someone stood. The Soviet zone became notorious for brutal camps packed with starvation and punishment, driving many Nazis to flee west and claim anti-communist sympathies. In the Western zones, enforcement varied. France viewed nearly the entire German population as complicit and prioritized rebuilding over sorting individual guilt, which meant many people with Nazi connections slipped through with little resistance. The overwhelming challenge of denazification. After the war, the Allies tried to cleanse Germany of Nazism, but the scale was staggering. Around 400,000 people were detained and screened, yet an estimated 45 million Germans had supported or been involved with the Nazi Party. It was like trying to sort an entire nation with a system built for a small town. The deeper the Allies looked, the clearer the problem became. Nearly every sector of society, law, education, engineering, administration, was filled with people who had worn the party badge. In the British zone, 90% of lawyers had Nazi ties. Without them, the courts would collapse. Britain eventually allowed nominal Nazis back into the system, just to keep the country running. France faced the same disaster after firing most of its teachers, only to rehire them when schools fell apart. What was meant to be a thorough cleansing quickly turned into a desperate balancing act. American officials originally believed denazification might take 50 years. Instead, by 1946, just 1 year after victory, the process was handed over to Germany itself. In a twist that baffled many, a nation once ruled by Nazis was now responsible for sorting out which former Nazis should be punished. The outcome was inevitable, the system softened, the lines blurred, and denazification became more of a negotiation than a purge. Germany's softer approach to justice. Once Germany took control of denazification, the system became far more lenient. The German government argued that anyone born after 1919 had been indoctrinated during their youth and therefore could not be held fully accountable. As a result, millions of party members were reclassified as followers, a category that carried little to no punishment. Roughly 75% of public officials removed by the U.S. occupation authorities were reinstated once Germans took the lead. The majority of remaining cases were rushed through courts using a simplified system that placed 90% of Nazis into the category of lesser offenders, avoiding harsh penalties or lengthy trials. As the Cold War intensified, the United States and other Western powers shifted their focus from punishing Nazis to countering Soviet influence. Former Nazis who were considered useful in administration, security, or intelligence were quietly forgiven or allowed to re-enter public life. Through a mixture of pardons and amnesties issued by German authorities, nearly 800,000 former Nazis were fully cleared of any legal responsibility. Even more shocking, by the early 1950s, almost 77% of senior officials in the German Ministry of Justice were themselves former Nazis, demonstrating how incomplete the cleanup truly was. A new life for the worst offenders. Another chapter of this forgotten story unfolded far away from Europe. After the war, thousands of Nazi officials and collaborators escaped across oceans using secret networks known as ratlines. These escape routes were supported by sympathetic European clergy, corrupt officials, and powerful governments. South America emerged as the most popular destination, offering dictatorships willing to ignore war crimes in exchange for technical knowledge or political alliances. Argentina became the primary sanctuary. Its president, Juan Perón, openly admired fascist ideologies and believed that welcoming former Nazi officers and scientists would strengthen Argentina's military and industrial power. Under his leadership, the government helped fugitives obtain falsified Red Cross passports and Argentine visas. Once they reached South American soil, many Nazis assumed new identities. Over time, several reverted to using their real names because they knew Argentina would never extradite them. Other countries in South America, including Brazil and Chile, also became havens, though none matched Argentina's scale. The U.S. recruitment of Nazi scientists. While South America offered secrecy and protection, the United States offered something else entirely: opportunity. In 1945, American intelligence initiated a covert mission called Operation Paperclip, designed to bring German scientists and engineers to the U.S. These men had been instrumental in creating V-2 rockets, advanced weapons, and cutting-edge technologies. U.S. officials believed they were too valuable to leave behind, especially since the Soviet Union was competing to claim the same scientific talent. Operation Paperclip operated in the shadows. Many German scientists were forcibly taken, interrogated, and then kept under watch while the U.S. evaluated their usefulness. Despite documented involvement with the Nazi Party, numerous scientists were granted citizenship, generous salaries, and long careers in America. Some became central figures in the U.S. missile program, and later contributed to NASA's space missions. The moral complexity was extraordinary. Individuals who once worked to strengthen Hitler's war machine later helped send astronauts to the moon. The Nuremberg Trials. Not every leading Nazi escaped scrutiny. The Nuremberg Trials, held in 1946, marked the first major international effort to prosecute war crimes. 24 prominent Nazi leaders faced charges that included crimes against humanity, aggressive war planning, and atrocities committed during the Holocaust. The trials were significant because they established legal precedents for prosecuting genocide and set the foundation for modern international criminal law. 12 defendants were executed, others imprisoned, and a few acquitted. Yet the Nuremberg trials represented only a fraction of justice. Millions had died under Nazi rule, and thousands of those involved in the machinery of murder never faced a judge. Critics later argued that the trials reflected victors' justice, since Allied nations themselves had carried out controversial wartime actions. The trials were necessary and historic, but they could not reach the vast majority of perpetrators. Nazi hunters and late justice. When governments began to look the other way, a new kind of pursuer stepped in: the Nazi hunters. These relentless individuals refused to let war criminals vanish into comfortable new lives. The most iconic among them was Simon Wiesenthal, a Holocaust survivor who turned his grief into a lifelong mission. His investigations exposed Franz Stangl in Brazil, a man tied to the Nazi euthanasia program. Stangl was tracked down, dragged back to West Germany, and sentenced to life. Then came one of the most dramatic hunts in history: Adolf Eichmann. After fleeing to Argentina under a fake name, Eichmann thought he was safe, until Israeli agents found him in 1960, kidnapped him in the dark, and smuggled him to Israel disguised as an injured airline worker. He was executed 2 years later. Even in modern times, some fugitives were still uncovered. In 2019, the U.S. finally deported Jacques Palige, a former Nazi camp guard who had lived quietly in New York for decades. These captures proved that, even long after the war, justice never fully stopped knocking. Where did they all go? The uncomfortable truth. The end of World War II didn't tie up the Nazi story with a neat bow. It exploded it in every direction. Some Nazis were punished, others slipped into new names and new countries, and many quietly rebuilt their lives in the very nations they once helped destroy. As the Cold War heated up, justice took a back seat and countless perpetrators vanished into politics, science labs, and South American safe havens. History likes to pretend 1945 was the end, but the truth stretched far beyond it, scattered, buried, and absorbed into new power structures. It's an uncomfortable reminder that justice isn't always clear-cut, and sometimes the world chooses convenience over consequences. If you learned something new or saw this chapter of history in a way you never have before, make sure to hit that like and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and tell us in the comments which historical mystery you want us to uncover next.